The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the third day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 3rd of Sivan, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. We will read special Torah readings for the holiday of Shavuot this coming Shabbat, and it is the 47th day of the Omer. Let's begin. Me'am Loez. We're going to continue learning the Torah reading for Shavuot that we'll read very soon, which comes out of Exodus chapter 19. We've been talking about this journey of the Israelites toward Mount Sinai and their preparations for it. Right? We spoke about the idea how Torah should be new for us every day. Like every day we're standing at Mount Sinai. We talked in the previous episode about this idea of having enthusiasm for Torah and how important it is to have enthusiasm for Torah, that we can't really even understand it unless we have that passion and that desire for Torah, and that the Israelites had that desire from the first day in which they left Egypt. Today we're going to talk about the kind of roller coaster ride of the spiritual status of the Jewish people as they left in their time as they left Egypt. You see, before the Jewish people came to Mount Sinai, our Parsha tells us that they were at a place called Refidim. Refidim, obviously the name of some town or something like that, or some area that they were in, was actually the place in which they made war with Amalek. We learn at the end of Parshat Bishalach that the Jewish people were attacked by this people, Amalek. They attacked us from behind. It was this horrible war. Thank God we were able to overcome them, but it was a very difficult war in which we need to remember the rest of our life in the mitzvah to remember to destroy the memory of Amalek. But there is more to it than that, because I think it's important to understand from a Torah perspective why that war happened. According to a Torah perspective from the Midrash, one of the reasons that this war happened is because the Jewish people became spiritually lax at this point in time. They made it through Yam Suf, the sea split for them, the Red Sea, this incredible miracle. Their enemies died. And very soon we see, if you just read the text of the end of Parshat Bishalach, they sort of get very used to this very quickly and already start looking back to Egypt, saying, "What can we go back? This is a hard life." And start losing gratitude for where they stand, even though it was such an incredible place in which they were standing. And because of that, they became spiritually lax. They began to transgress. They began to not act as their best self. And this is hinted at in the town's name of Refidim. Refidim the rabbis felt there was a play of words in this of the Hebrew word rafu, which means to loosen or to loosen up. And it's at this place in which the Jewish people loosened up. And because of their loosening up, there was a war with Amalek, and Amalek attacked. In response to the war, most people, when they've won a war, a very hard war, and they feel at this point weak and tired, they'll retreat to the high ground to make sure they're not attacked again. But we don't see that with Bnei Israel. Instead, they retreat to the low ground. It could have easily said that the Jewish people ran up Mount Sinai to make sure to protect themselves from any future Amalekites that attacked them. But we don't see that. They stood next to the mountain. They stood in the plains, in the wilderness of Sinai. It never says that they actually entered the mountain. Actually, they were prohibited from entering the mountain. And that place is actually a place where there's not a lot of physical safety. You're kind of standing in open ground. And our rabbis tell us, according to the Me'am Loez, that this represents the idea that after, in response to the war with Amalek, they repented and they tried to better themselves and realized that they need to be thankful for where they stand and they need to be connected to Hashem and do good in order to be where they are. Otherwise, they're going to enter more wars with Amalek, and they need to have faith in Hashem. And so they demonstrated this actually by standing in the Midbar Sinai, outside the mountain, not on the mountain, next to the mountain, to show that they weren't putting their faith necessarily in physical army tactics or strategy, military strategy, or even physical strength, but rather their faith in Hashem, that Hashem would protect them if they chose to be their best selves. And they showed this to God by encamping in Midbar Sinai. I think this is a great lesson for all of us. In order to receive Torah on Mount Sinai, we have to put our faith in Hashem. We actually have to fix our behavior. We have to try to seek to become our best self. And it's for that reason that we receive the Torah. We can't actually get the Torah, and it wouldn't matter even if we did, if we're not striving to become our best self. If we're being lax and sort of saying anything goes, Torah won't do us any good. Torah will only do us good with the ingredient of trying to be a better person, of really pushing oneself to be the best person they can be, and not living sort of a willy-nilly life, anything goes, but rather trying every day to be one's best self. And especially after falls, after spiritual falls, after moments where we don't feel like we're our best selves, to come back the next day, to wake up the next morning and say, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try to be better. I know I was Rafu yesterday. I knew I was in Refidim yesterday fighting Amalek. But today, I stand at Midbar Sinai as a repentant person. Mishnah Torah. We're going to turn to a new subject in Mishnah Torah today. We're going to turn to chapter 7 of Hilchot De'ot. Chapter 6 is great in Hilchot De'ot, by the way. You should read it. It's really beautiful. But I'm not sure if it really is halacha l'maaseh, like very practical halacha, but rather more what I would call ideals, probably things that belong in the Menorat HaMaor part of our learning. And so we skip that chapter, not because it's bad content, but just because it doesn't fit into what we're trying to accomplish, which is to teach practical halacha. So the 7th chapter, on the other hand, though, does very much teach practical halacha, and that is the laws of speech. How we speak, what is considered prohibited speech, and how we actually look at that from a legal perspective, and how we make sure not to transgress through our speech. This is probably one of the hardest transgressions, the hardest things not to transgress in our world. So every Jew should take at least some time in their life or regularly, even just a little bit a day, to study these laws of speech. Now, Maimonides really was the first one to begin setting down these laws. And of course, he is one of the first law codes. Obviously, this is taught a lot in the Talmud, it's talked a lot about in the Talmud, but he's the first one who really tried to codify it. We don't see in many other legal sources that anyone really tries to codify this. It mostly gets left in the realm of an ideal practice or things that we should do. But it's very obvious that in the Talmud that this is not something that is just some kind of ideal thing that we should strive for as Jews, but actually a bottom line minimum requirement that if we violate these laws, we are transgressing. It's not that we're just not a really pious person, but we're actually sitting at that point. It's for that reason that the later author Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan in the 1800s wrote the famous sefer Chafetz Chaim, The Searcher for Life, to detail in much greater detail than this chapter the laws of lashon hara. But his laws seem extremely, extremely expansive, and following them to a T, honestly, it makes it really, really hard to basically say anything to anyone. That sefer requires a lot of attention and intense research for a future project to try to understand, okay, what of these laws are real halacha, serious halacha, and which of these laws are, well, maybe something good to strive for, something to work towards, but not bottom line halacha. Hopefully I'll get to that project at some point. I'd love to be able to write a commentary on the Chafetz Chaim at some point. And it's for that reason that I think I actually find these laws in the Mishnah Torah really beautiful here, because it's a lot less, in some ways more basic, but these are much more clearly related to Pesukim, the verses of the Torah itself, and much more related to that. I'm much more sure that these are not just laws of ideals, but actual baseline requirements for Jewish law. And it's with that, let's get into the content itself. So we're going to learn the first 2 halachot today, if we can get through it. The first halacha says, a person who collects gossip about a colleague violates a prohibition, as Leviticus 19:16 says, do not go around gossiping among your people. So the first category that the Rambam puts out is this idea of a rachil, or richilut. That is the word that the Vayikra itself uses in that verse when it said, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha. Rachil is the word for like a peddler, someone who peddles goods for a business. And what the Torah means here is what we would understand as gossip, right? Going around and talking to different people about what you know and hearing what they know and everything like this. He says, even though this transgression is not punished by lashes, it is a severe sin and caused the death of many Jews. Therefore, the warning, do not stand still over your neighbor's blood, is placed to it next to it in the Torah, right? That's actually the next verse. Don't go gossiping about your neighbor. Don't shed the blood don't stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. And so this is kind of the most lenient prohibition in terms of lashon hara. Obviously, it's a Torah prohibition here, but it's probably the least severe form of lashon hara. So in the second halacha, Rambam defines what the gosper is in greater detail. He says, who is a gosper? One who collects information and then goes from person to person saying, this is what so-and-so said. This is what I heard about so-and-so. Even if the statements are true, they bring about the destruction of the world. So let's understand what Rambam is saying here so we can understand the category. A person who gossips is not necessarily somebody who is lying and saying lies about somebody else. It's not even someone who's necessarily saying negative information about somebody else, but rather it's someone who spends a lot of the day going around hearing information about other people and telling information about other people just because it's fun, right? Just because it's pleasurable, not to achieve any actual real purpose, but just because it's something enjoyable to do. The next category that the Rambam states is lashon hara. Lashon hara is relating deprecating facts about a colleague, even if they're true. And the translation here, I'm reading from Sefaria here, is colleague here, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a colleague, any other person it's talking to. So lashon hara is one step above and worse than gossip because it's actually relaying information that is always deprecating about the person that you're talking about. Now, it's very important to understand that both in terms of gossip and in terms of lashon hara, we're really only talking about things that are true. Once you're lying, it's a whole different category of transgression, even more severe. But lashon hara is more severe than gossip because it's actually relating information that is harmful or deprecating of somebody else. This is very, very important law from the Torah that we need to follow, that in every case, relating deprecating information about somebody else, even if it's true, is very much forbidden, except for a few exceptions. And we'll get into those exceptions. But basically, it's an exception unless you have a professional capacity where you have to do something to make the world a better place, and you have to relay a negative information about somebody. And if you need to do that, you should do it in a very private way. Or there's a business transaction and someone's trying to find out if a business is trustworthy or a person is trustworthy. At that point in time, you can actually then say you're deprecating information in order to save a person from making a bad business decision. But other than that, and of course there are so much more exceptions. These are very complicated laws when we actually get into it. But for the most part, 90% of the time, relaying any deprecating information about someone else, even if it's true, is forbidden by the Torah. And not only that, just gossiping, just enjoying talking about other people, even if it's not deprecating information, even if it's nice things that you're saying about other people, would still be considered gossip and still be considered forbidden in the Torah. So we should make sure that a pastime in our lives does not become talking about other people. Every once in a while, okay, you have to talk about somebody else. But that should not be a regular occurrence in our lives, and we should certainly not become habituated to it. Menorat HaMaor. We'll continue learning Menorat HaMaor on the holiday of Shavuot. And today we're going to learn something really interesting. I thought this was really, 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 really beautiful. I mean, usually most days I think what I'm teaching hopefully is beautiful, but this really was profoundly got me thinking. And hopefully it'll get you thinking too. So there's something peculiar about the holiday of Shavuot. Oftentimes Shavuot is compared to two other holidays, Sukkot and Pesach. And together, all three holidays are called the Shlosh Regalim, or the 3 pilgrimage holidays, the 3 holidays in the Torah that require pilgrimage to the Beit HaMikdash originally. With the 2 other holidays, with Pesach and Sukkot, though, we have a specific lines in the Torah that tell us what the holiday is about. For example, Passover is the day in which we remember Yetziat Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt, when God brought us out of Egypt and redeemed us from Egyptian slavery. Sukkot is a holiday in which we remember how the Jewish people went through the desert sleeping in booths or huts. And we kind of reenact that ourselves by, sleeping in huts, sleeping in Sukkot. And this is actually recorded in the Torah, in Parshat Amor. It actually tells us that this is the reason for Sukkot. Now, many know that the idea behind Shavuot is that it's the day in which the Torah was given. But it's important to note that that's not actually listed in the Torah itself. The Torah never actually gives the reason why that we actually celebrate Shavuot besides celebrate Shavuot. So why did the Torah actually not detail explicitly the theme of the day of Shavuot? This is a question that I've often pondered myself, and it's nice to see here an answer from the Menorat HaMaor, a beautiful answer, I must say. It took me a while to absorb this and even understand what he was saying here, but once I understood it, it's really beautiful. So he basically says that, many, many different cultures from around the world, especially at the time of the Torah, celebrated the physical reality and worship physical reality. So it was very common for people, for example, to worship the sun or the moon, and this is almost every other culture around. They worshipped physical things that they could actually see. This is represented by the number 7. That's why there are 7 days of the week for that, for example. We see 7 come up so often. We even see 7 come up in Judaism all the time, right? There are 7 times they circled the city of Jericho. There are a lot of 7s in Judaism as well. And so you might say as a Jew, well, we too should worship the physical reality. And it's that reason that the holiday of Shavuot, we count before it how many weeks? 7 weeks. 7 weeks of 7 days. We count 49 days before Shavuot, which 7 times 7. And Shavuot then happens on the day after that, on the 50th day. And the essence of the holiday, according to the Torah, is that it's Shavuot. It's after these 7 Shavuot. It's beyond these 7 Shavuot. And according to the author of the Menorat HaMaor, he basically says that this is actually supposed to represent the reality of what the Torah actually is. It is beyond perceived reality. It is beyond the things that other people mistakenly worship, that our God is beyond all those things. It's behind all those things. And so too is the Torah itself is beyond the physical reality in which we can see. It comes from a place that is even beyond that. And so the day itself is not even explicitly said in the Torah because that would actually be downgrading what the day really is. It is a day that is beyond physical reality. It's a day that's beyond the 7th day of the week. And we actually see this 50th thing. For example, the famous midrash about Moses is that there are 50 gates of understanding, and he gained 49 of them, basically. And he was basically at the 50th and at the precipice of understanding the 50th. And so this is basically the idea that there's like this 50th gate of understanding, that the number 50 is like one beyond what is the achievable reality and the perceived reality that we see around us. And so that actually defines what Shavuot is in itself. And according to the Menorat HaMaor, that's the reason why the Torah didn't explicitly say that this is the day in which the Torah was given, because that would make the Torah seem much less. Instead, it says this is the holiday that is beyond all things. It's beyond all the weeks, right? It's the 50th. It's not the 7th or the 49th. It's the 50th. It's beyond all of perceived reality, which I think defines Torah very well and defines what Judaism is all about and why it's so different from so many other faiths and so many other traditions and things that people worship. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.